Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and however you are listening, and welcome to the Valley Life Podcast, where we're taking theology from the classroom to the living room, storeroom, stockroom, showroom, workroom, weight room, and water closet, and also across the pond over into the Anglican Church.
Yeah.
As we continue our series, continue it because we did an introduction episode.
We did.
Yeah. Called Riled Up. And you know who's riled up about this series? Watcher, listener, is my man, Brandon Lockridge. Hey, buddy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm very riled up and happy to be here.
Just in general, but in particular, I think about this series, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. There was enough. I've read enough that it's almost made me an Anglican.
Almost.
But,
Just enough. That's right. It's like I've watched just enough Angels baseball to appreciate, but not quite ready to leave the Los Angeles Dodgers.
The Los Angeles.
The Los Angeles Dodgers. Well, if you're wondering what our series Riled Up is all about, it's about an Anglican bishop named J.C. Ryle who lived in the 1800s and who ministered in the second city of England known as Liverpool. And so we're going to talk a little bit about his life, his ministry. Today we're going to look at his life and ministry in the city. We'll talk a little bit about Liverpool, the context in which he ministered, and then really looking at his strategy to reach the city for the cause of Christ and to help make disciples. So, in fact, one author will say that no aspect of J.C. Ryle's life and ministry has received more attention than his time in his episcopacy.
Oh, man, I'm so glad that it was you that said that because I was like, I hope you do not ask me to say that word.
No, we're going to define that for you because it's not a great big American word, or for sure it's not an often used evangelical word. So, Dear Brandon, help the listener, help the watcher out. What is an episcopacy?
So what we have here is, as a noun, it's a government of church by bishops. And the episcopacy, the bishops of a region or a church collectively.
So this is a form of or style of church government in which you have local pastors in the church, and then those local pastors in the churches in a particular region are overseen or ruled by a bishop.
Right.
Correct. And so J.C. Ryle ascended to or was selected for that title of bishop, and he oversaw a diocese, which is just simply a district or a region.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. So, like, when you think about it, so go and now let's think about a Presbyterian model, right? So, a presbytery, you have, a similar situation where you have churches within a district, right? And then you've got, leaders at different levels of the presbytery. But how it's different is, those the various leaders in a given presbytery typically have their own church that they're pastoring. To whereas a bishop, that's kind of his thing. That's his job. He's just overseeing all the other churches. He doesn't necessarily have his own.
Right. Yeah. At best, he's pastoring the pastors and leading a church of churches, essentially a collection of churches. Other forms of government are congregationalist, where the most local control and authority happens within the body of the church. I'm not a huge fan. We see congregationalism pretty much one time in the Bible and ended up in the golden calf. We're like, hey, let's ask everybody what we should do. I know. Let's make a golden calf.
Yeah.
And then so congregationalism, episcopacy, the bishop model, or then as Brandon described, is the Presbyterian model, which is the model that we subscribe to here at Valley Life Community Church. Ryle was a part of the Anglican Church or the Church of England, and so they use this episcopacy model. And so in the year 1880, Ryle was selected to become the bishop in the city of Liverpool. So let's talk a little bit about the time and place that he ministered in. You got any interesting facts about Liverpool for the listener?
I mean,
in 1880?
Yeah, it really, really fascinating because the growth of the city at that time was extraordinary. Go ahead and make some noise.
I know, sorry, man.
Open up that can.
Terrible etiquette.
It's all good. So the growth of Liverpool was extraordinary. You go looking at some of the numbers, and they were a big port for shipping. Sea shipping and all that stuff, right? So it was regarded, as you mentioned at the top of the episode here, as the second city of the British Empire due to its enormous wealth that was generated by its seafaring commerce. And the real secret of to Liverpool's progress was the engineering and technological advances associated with the Industrial Revolution. So, Industrial Revolution is in full effect at this time, and they're really progressing pretty quick. And a lot of people were coming into Liverpool and going out of Liverpool. It was just a big hub of commerce and travel and whatnot. So, and this was during the first half of Queen Victoria's reign in England. So
all you Anglophiles who watch all those shows on your streaming services,
yep,
Ryle was ministering at those time when all those people were doing all those naughty things that you like to watch on your streaming that you don't tell your pastor about.
Yeah, the PBS Masterpiece and all.
Oh, all that business.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, but England was, much in the way that probably the United States eventually became. At that time in the 19th century, England was unrivaled as the supreme industrial, commercial, and colonial power in the world.
Yeah, so there's a time of economic boom during Ryle's ministry, and then particularly this city, you really begin to see a great divide. Typically, when you have a big industrial boom or a big advancement, is you see the wealth get wealthier and the poor get poorer. And that happened in Liverpool. And so you really had this, what one author describes as a city within a city, what was called squalid Liverpool. And this created an area kind of almost like a buffer between the wealthy and the industry.
Yeah.
So you had the dock where all the work was getting done and the shipping, and then you had like the squalid Liverpool, and then in the suburbs of Liverpool, you had where the wealthier business owners and shipping company owners would live. This population swelled so fast in the city that it created this not only economic divide, but ultimately some real challenges to the city because of all this. So what are some of the challenges within the city that Ryle faced at this time?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, as the wealthy kind of started to move outwards to those suburbs, and a lot of the poor were sort of left behind in city central, right? And so when Ryle became the first bishop of this newly formed district of Liverpool, there was well over 1 million souls that he was essentially in charge of. And so he's, obviously needs to figure out, how he is going to manage this many people. And some of the things that came up were, first and foremost, obviously, as you can imagine, as sort of the wealthy kind of move outward and the city center is left with sort of, impoverished, it becomes unsafe in a number of ways, right? So first and foremost, think of sanitary issues, right? The city became very unsanitary, and it's a sort of a housing crisis, right? It was just a dirty place, right? Also, the crime would increase because of the fact that they were heavily understaffed in their policing, right? So there weren't enough police to police the crime, and so obviously all kinds of debauchery starts to take place at that point.
Yeah, no, this isn't the Pacific Northwest we're describing, but by 1884, there were 2,402 public houses or drinking houses in and around Liverpool. In fact, the author records in 1892, it was estimated that the residents of Liverpool spent $10,000 a day on drink on average.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, overpopulation, lack of housing, drunkenness, crime, and then what follows that is typically prostitution.
Right. Right. Well, what was interesting too is they talked about how with the drunkenness issue, they couldn't really police it well, right? So you had licenses that were given to certain places that could serve drink, right? And then it became such an issue that they eventually did these, licensed these public houses, and so almost any house, right, could get a license for drink to serve drink, and so they thought, well, maybe this will help create sort of a competition, right? And so as you increase the competition, people can kind of go anywhere to get a drink, and so maybe some of these places will close down, and it'll sort of level it out a little bit. But the drunkenness just increased, right? And so
it's interesting. In order to combat drunkenness, we're going to license more people to serve adult beverages.
Right.
That'll fix it.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
But yeah, prostitution was rampant. It says they write here at one point that in 1869, it was reported that Liverpool contained 847 houses, quote, for immoral purposes on 208 streets. So 208 streets with 847 brothels, essentially.
Right.
That is it's
almost 4 per street.
Yeah, exactly. It says that 99 streets contain 2 or more, and 1 street contained 37 brothels. So
that's a lot of brothels.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Vegas of, that was the strip, right? The brothel strip, essentially.
It's legit, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, no pun intended.
It's fine. No, you're good. Education becomes a problem as you get children living in that squalid Liverpool, that kind of that inner circle, almost inadequate or non-existent education for children, which again, you can see how that would lead to an advance in crime and lower standards of living for adults as they graduate.
Violent deaths rose to staggering numbers. Reported here that in 1857, 609 inquests held at the coroner's court. So 108 were dock-related injuries, which, as you can imagine, a dock worker at that time in the 19th century.
Yeah, no OSHA.
No. Yeah, so there would have been a lot of opportunities for accidents and things like that. So obviously, 108 there. That you're probably thinking that makes sense. 4 were connected with the prison. Okay, Now the rest, 493, were assumed to involve foul play. So in 1 year in Liverpool, 493 deaths as a result of foul play.
So these are just some of the city challenges. Let's maybe highlight a few of the church's challenges. So one of them, as we mentioned, is just geography and population. Right? You've got well over 1 million people by 1881, within the first year of Ryle's leadership there as bishop. And then you've got as I mentioned, the squalid Liverpool, and then you've got the outer suburbs of Liverpool where many of the wealthier residents were living, and then you've got the industrial Liverpool. So you've got all these different districts and all these different residents and styles of life that you've got to try to minister to.
Yeah. And then they were sort of battling against the Roman Catholic Church at the same time. There was a lot of Roman Catholics at that time in the 1880s. 1881 census revealed that 28% of Liverpudlians.
Bro, I wasn't even going to attempt that. I am proud of you.
When I read, I was like, instead of Liverpoolans or something, Liverpudlians. So in case,
like a puddle.
Yeah, in case you didn't know, dear listener, they are called Liverpudlians.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
So 28% of Liverpudlians were professed Roman Catholics. And obviously the challenge there was that the Church of England, right, the Anglican Church was a Christian church. And as we're going to see from Ryle, evangelical Anglican, right?
Yep.
And so this was a divorce from Roman Catholicism.
Right.
Now, we can certainly talk about how, and this is a different discussion, but later on, as the Anglican Church progressed, they probably became a little more Roman Catholic in practice years later, right? But at this time in the 19th century, they were distinctly not Roman Catholic and distinctly evangelical Christian.
Yeah, and the Anglican Church is a state-endorsed church. Right? So to be English and to go to church meant you were part of, or meant to be a part of the Anglican Church. And so the Roman Catholic Church is not just a divorce of your religion, but it's also a divorce of your state identity. To say, I'm not that. I'm not a part of the state church.
Yeah, and this is a fascinating thing about the Anglican Church, right? The Church of England, as you mentioned, a state church. So the clergymen who had a diocese, who were over a district, everyone that lived in that district essentially belonged to them, right? They had a responsibility, even if these, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Jones at address such and such don't come to our church. They have no interest in anything religious, right? But we need to care for them, right? Because they're in our district, and so we have a responsibility to them and a care for them.
Yep.
Which that was the point that made me almost want to be Anglican right there. I was kind of like, it's kind of interesting concept.
It is. When we get into his diocese or his district strategy to reach, I think there's some things for us today to learn, which is one of the reasons I'm riled up.
Yes, there you go.
Urban migration was a challenge for the church. Again, with a high industrial age, and especially like an industry like dock working, where you can do anywhere where there's a port or a major port of industry, you get just kind of folks who might roll in 2 or 3 years and then roll right back out. As one minister described it at this point in time, he said it was like riding in water, trying to be a minister. Right, trying to minister to people's lives, and they're in and out. And then, as we mentioned, the overpopulation led to a crisis. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say another interesting thing about the urban migration that posed a challenge is that back at this time, and it stopped in the mid 20th century. It actually was. They were stopping the practice in the late 19th and earliest 20th century, but at this time, they were still renting pews. So they did the practice of pew renting.
Yep.
And so, if you were, middle income to higher income churchgoer, you could actually rent your seat, right?
Instead of getting there early and putting your Bible on it.
Exactly. Instead of getting there early, putting your Bible, your phone, or your jacket or something in there.
Yep. Or telling your small children to stay put.
Right, exactly.
And tell other people who are coming in. Yeah.
Guilty.
Tell other people who are coming to the church, no, you can't sit here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, but you rent out your seat. And so they had a certain percentage of seats that were free seats, right, for just anybody walking in. But they had a large number of people that would rent their seat out. And so thinking about the urban migration, what happened is when some of the wealthy churchgoers would move out into the suburbs, they would keep their seat. They wouldn't let it go. They would keep it, excuse me, let me say that again. The church wouldn't repurpose it into a free seat.
Right.
So what would happen is churchgoers who were renting a seat would leave. They would keep it as a rented seat, but people wouldn't pick it up because back to the whole, the poor population, right? The poor population didn't have the means to rent a seat on a consistent basis. So, but because that was designated as a rented seat, now it can't be filled because the poor can't pay for it. So there was empty seats all throughout these churches that were rented seats that weren't being picked up by anybody.
Some non-denominational church planter with a marketing degree is picking all this up. And it's like, this is a great idea. I'll just rent my seats out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So this leads to too few places of worship and a lack of seating. So the data is a little stagnant before Ryle got there, but by 1851, you had a population of over 300,000 and only 45 churches that could accommodate only 55,000 people. So again, in the Anglican model, where you're responsible for an entire physical region and wanting to see that physical region come to Christ and worship Him, in theory, you need to have seats for every soul. And there's just a dearth of that. It only covered about 15% of the population in 1850.
Yeah. Yeah, that was fascinating.
And then two more quick challenges. Too few pastors. Again, you can imagine there's too few churches and there's going to be too few pastors. Ryle was not exaggerating when he describes his first charge this way. He says, "I venture boldly to say there is not another district in all England in which the disproportion between the demands of the church and the supply the church has provided is so startling and so serious."
Mm-hmm.
And then also the pastors who were present were also severely underpaid. This not only was there a lack of pastors, but those pastors who were there really struggled and were kept in poverty either because the state decided what to pay the ministers, or they were ministering in these squalid, very poor areas, and so the parishioners couldn't support the pastors.
Right, exactly. And a lot of them would try to make money off of those pew rentals or various like small fees that were associated with the church, but none of it was enough to keep a lot of these clergymen afloat, right? And so a lot of them burned out and quit.
Yep. Abraham Hume, who ministered in Ryle's district, described it this way. He said, "Need we wonder that in many cases the clergyman finds hope and heart fail him, not from the magnitude of the task, again, not because the job's so hard, which he does not fear, but from the want of adequate means, which renders him in a great degree helpless." He just doesn't have the resources to do the work, right? Whether that's housing or clothing or even food for himself or his family.
Right. Yeah. So you have poor clergymen trying to minister to poor people, and it was just it was really unfortunate.
So we flash forward to those are some of the challenges of the city and challenges of the church. If we flash forward to Ryle's appointment, this takes place July 1st of 1880, and he's enthroned as the first bishop of Liverpool. And in large aspects, this was a transition point for the church. It's a test case. Could the Church of England effectively minister to the masses in a large, modern, urbanized, industrialized city? Right? And so Ryle was planted there to help answer this question and to kind of figure it out.
Right. And it's interesting the way that he came to the job. Right. The way he got the position was he was essentially, there was this gentleman by the name of Lord Sandon, who was an MP for Liverpool.
Member of Parliament.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask about, because I didn't actually understand what the MP was. So he was a member of Parliament for Liverpool, and he basically just wanted Ryle in that spot. It sounded like the Parliament was going to be changing. Right, because there was an election that had held, and the incumbent had lost, and so stuff was going to be switched around. And if they didn't put their guy in that they wanted now, then it wasn't going to happen. And they'd already known that the new Parliament was going to select somebody else for that position, and so this gentleman, Lord Sandon, wanted Ryle in that seat, right? And so it even makes mention that it wasn't for political reasons or anything like that. It wasn't even a ecclesiastical reason. They just wanted Ryle there. He had a reputation at the time, and they wanted to put him there.
Yeah, he administered by this point. He'd actually just been appointed to be a director of a Christian college,
right?
And he wasn't there very long. I think it was less than 2 years, and he gets appointed to this Bishop of Liverpool. So as we wrap up, we've talked about the context and the challenges that Ryle faced in Liverpool. In our next episode, we're going to look at his strategy to reach the city. Any final thoughts, or as you consider some of the challenges that in context that Ryle ministered in?
Nothing from me. I'm excited to kind of talk about his strategy as we get into the strategy. I think, this what I saw as kind of a four-pronged approach was really fascinating, and so come back for the next episode.
Come back for the next episode. So, dear listener, dear watcher, if you think about J.C. Ryle ministering in 1880 of Liverpool, some of the challenges and some of the context, they're not too dissimilar from where we live. And so, if the Bible describes things that have happened, are happening, and will happen, we can look to the past to learn about our present and continue to find hope for our future. Well, for Mr. Brandon Lockridge, I'm Pastor Vinnie Hankey. Thank you for listening to the Valley Life Podcast, and as always, God bless you.